Right, well, let's unpack this further with international relations expert Professor Gilbert Khadiagala. Prof, good to speak to you. Now, what factors contributed to this ceasefire agreement being reached at this juncture? Is Donald Trump a factor?
Yeah, certainly Donald Trump is a factor because he, although he's very close to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Trump has plagued that he doesn't want any more wars globally. And is determined that this war should at least end under his watch. And so he's very likely that at this very moment, the Israelis, I don't think, want to disappoint Trump because they think he's their best friend in the White House. And therefore, they have no choice but, in fact, to begin to concede to what the U.S. has been saying. At least there has been an agreement that was negotiated between Trump, a Middle East envoy, and then the Biden Middle East envoy. So it's a confluence of very interesting events, but I think the Trump factor is the best factor here. And I said because of the friendship with Trump, and the Israelis don't want to make any mistake. They'll rather hold on to Trump because I think he'll do better things for them. And the war, therefore, in Gaza is going to be a distraction.
Okay, so let's talk about this ceasefire and what the benefits are, certainly to the Israelis, you know, who've been the major oppressor, if you will. A number of hostages will be released. But do you also get the sense that they've achieved what they wanted to achieve? I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of, well, not hundreds of thousands, but more than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last year and a bit that this has been going on for.
This agreement was actually presented to the parties in May 2024. And so the good question to ask is why now? I think the Israelis have benefited tremendously from the war in terms of decimating the leadership of Hamas. You recall that the leader of Hamas was killed not too long ago, and the geopolitical situation in the Middle East has changed dramatically in Israel's favor. You know, the wars in Lebanon, Syria, Assad leaving. The Israelis are now fully in control of that region. Hezbollah has been decimated. So it's very appropriate for Israel now to pause, having in fact achieved all those gains. And of course, what's happening in Gaza itself with the tremendous humanitarian crisis that Israel created. But they feel they're in a better position now to make some concession. This agreement is very complex and very delicate. It is just the beginning of, I think, what is going to be a very long-term process, because the first part is only going to be 42 days when these hostages will be released and when Israelis begin to withdraw gradually from the Gaza Strip and some Palestinians being released. But it's a long way to a permanent ceasefire. So I think it buys Netanyahu some time, and I think it relieves the pressure on him. And I think Hamas is ready for an agreement that also, in fact, helps it for things not to get worse anymore.
So, Prof, we know that the Palestinians have long wanted this ceasefire, but they didn't want this war at all because, or this attack, if you will. What are the Palestinians thinking? What are the Israelis, I beg your pardon, thinking at this point? Are they in support of a ceasefire?
I think the majority of the Israelis are in support of a ceasefire because they think, the emotional issues around hostages is important. A driver, I think, to the Israeli public opinion. I think they want their men and women home. Fortunately, most of them are alive, but we know that there are some who are going to come back dead. So the public wants the end to the war. But of course, you have right-wingers within the government, within the military, who think that, in fact, they needed to occupy the Gaza and occupy it forever. there are some Israelis that I think on the right-wing side who also think that, in fact, they should get their settlers in the Gaza Strip. So the majority of the Israelis, I think, want an end to the war. It's been very distracting. It's also been very destructive to their politics at home, because I don't think it's safe to go to war, particularly in a context where Netanyahu is also a problem, and he's gained a lot of mileage from this war. But I suspect that down the road, I think we'll know who trumps, because if the right wingers can overthrow that government or can cause the fall of Netanyahu's government, then it will be like things are going back to normal. But hopefully, they'll continue to observe the ceasefire. Hostages will be released, because, tomorrow, only 3 hostages will be released tomorrow. So the 42-day period is when now all the 33 hostages will be released. So it's a very delicate moment for the Israelis to, if they want to sustain the momentum for peace, they will have, in fact, to play by the terms of this agreement. And so the Palestinians, they will have to behave and live up to the terms of this agreement.
There have been a lot of parties that have been involved in this process of trying to get to this ceasefire and an agreement. Other parties that have also come into the conversation are the United Nations and the ICJ. Now, where do we see them? Obviously, largely ineffective, if you will.
No, the ICJ has taken a secondary position here because, or even the ICC, if we could put it that way, because Netanyahu was indicted as a war criminal not too long ago. So all these actors have taken a secondary position, because I think the belief is that you need a ceasefire, you need to resolve the humanitarian crisis. There are 1 million people displaced, and the suffering there is so bad that, in fact, everybody is going to have to stop and see whether, in fact, we can get some peace on the ground. And therefore, the rest of these other problems, the ICJ, the ICC, maybe those could come much later, the UN. But everybody, I think, is supportive of an agreement that, in fact, stops the war, even if it's just a temporary ceasefire. Hopefully, within this time period, there could be good discussions about a permanent ceasefire and then maybe a two-state solution for the region.
Now, very quickly, Prof, let's talk about the Palestinian people in Gaza, that process of rebuilding, right? That state obviously has been decimated over the last few months. What are the processes they're likely to take? Which nations are going to support? Is the United States likely to come in and aid the process of rebuilding?
I think under the auspices of the UN, the international community will galvanize around the reconstruction of Gaza. I don't think the United States would avoid that responsibility. They may not take the lead role, but I think there are so many other actors, even the EU, that have the gravitas, that have the integrity to lead that process. But as I said, the UN here, I think, is the key player. It's an enormous task to reconstruct a society that has been destroyed, a society that is on the ground. And therefore, it is going to cost a lot of money. And somebody has to come up with that money. And hopefully we can get the international community making a commitment to the reconstruction of that region.
Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, that's where we'll leave that conversation, as that ceasefire set to kick in tomorrow, 8:30 South African time.